Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name is Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor. Welcome to video number 71 of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. We've wrapped up the ends to produce the line we need on each end of this base in order to have the stone to break to. Now we got to produce this face. We did this end and this end first so we can match this. What we'll do is we'll wrap these corners up just a little bit to get those as flat as they need to be. We've already got it. We just have to carry it on a little bit. Then I'm going to take right here at the center and cut down to my line. And then we'll work to balance these out to go. My straight edge won't quite go all the way. We'll work to match these up and get them just right. And then we'll take this all down and balance it out. I am pretty excited because I don't remember what day we started, what day I sat down and told you my story, but it was a year ago, within a week or so. I think it was towards the end of January. I really don't remember. Really doesn't make any difference in the big picture. But we're 71 videos into this long journey, and I'm really excited. I've got, it looks like there's a handful of people that are actually serious enough to be following along and doing this, and we're getting some questions and getting some direct contact and some interaction with people who are serious about doing this work. We had, I don't know if I mentioned it, had one guy stop one time, and he had apparently been to see my sculptor in Vermont years ago, and he spent a couple weeks up there, and he came down here and he wanted to carve, and he had lots of ideas, and he'd done some marble, and he looked around, and towards the end of his visit he says, "You really can't do this as a hobby. This is really serious. There's a lot involved here. You got to have a certain amount of equipment and a certain amount of ability to handle the weight and everything." And I said, "Yeah, this isn't a hobby." There's a lot of people that will tell you you can just play with this and you have fun with it. You can. You're not going to get very far. There's a lot to this, and there's a lot of people that I'm quite sure that we're a year into this apprenticeship, and they're saying, "Well, he ain't carved nothing yet. He ain't carved any pretty faces or any beautiful birds or flowers or none of that." Okay, this is how an apprenticeship goes. Most people don't have the ability, when they start driving and hand them keys to a Corvette or a Ferrari, say, "Here you go, buddy, have fun." Everybody knows how that ends when you give a 16-year-old the keys to a car like that. They usually get the family sedan or station wagon or some minivan, whatever, and they have to learn. Same thing with this. You've got to learn. This basic stuff that I'm showing you is going to make all the other work so much easier, so much more straightforward. As a matter of fact, because this base came in needing to be all cut like this, which I had planned to do, this gives me a chance to show you how to do the work that you're going to need to be able to do the fancy work. And so it will be straightforward. When something comes up and all of a sudden you've got to do some basic finishing work, you can dive right in and do it. So don't get frustrated. There's a reason to this. When you're a chef, you teach somebody how to use their French knife, not so they can go up and go all kinds of fancy games. They'll use it the correct way, and they'll be really slow at first, and they get really frustrated because, and this has happened over and over and over again in the kitchen. Everybody says, "I don't want to do that, chef. I know what I'm doing." No, you don't. Do what I'm telling you, trust me, and watch. They'll stick with it, and a couple months later, almost every one of them will say, "Wow, I can't believe I can do this with a knife. I didn't want to do this. I hated you. I couldn't stand what you're showing me." Okay, same thing here. I'm showing you the basics, and then you're going to be able to actually do the work. Okay, let's get cutting stone. Doing a little bit of sawing to open this up. Get used to how your tools feel. The saw had a little bit of a vibration to it. It wasn't perfectly smooth. We just changed the blade, right? Sometimes the screws will back out a little bit. You got to stop, A lot of times it's easy. Take it out, stop, and just let it coast down and watch the blade, and the blade will just have a little bit of shake as it's winding down. We'll take and tighten it up really good. Now, if you twist these off, tighten them, you're better off to go back afterwards and tighten them again to snug them than to over tighten them and bugger up the screws and you put the brand new blade in, okay? But this is one of those things, like I talked about, listening for cracks, listening to how your tool changes, because your carbide will chip or break and start to come loose, and it'll have a different tone. Same thing, this will feel different. It just had just a little bit of a shake to it. I knew the blade was either cracked, warped, or was loose. Tighten it up. Back to work. When you're doing rough out work particularly, even if you're good, sometimes you'll chip your chisel. Now, there's a couple options for this. I could take this chip tool and put it aside, or just go ahead now and turn it into a round chisel. Just round off the other edge and keep on working. I need a flat. I'm going to go ahead and do the other thing because I'm doing rough out work. I'm going to go ahead and put that on the grinder and flatten that, bevel that chip so that that chip doesn't fracture anymore. And then after I sharpen it a couple more times, I'll catch up with it and I'll have a full width chisel. To just take and grind that to a flat right now and waste, you know, 1/8 of an inch of carbide, that's money. You don't want to do that. Go ahead and figure out a way around it. So I'm going to go ahead and tip that on the grinder, and I'll be right back and show you. Okay, you can see where I ran that down. It's not ideal, but this is reality. So once I sharpen that 2 or 3 times, I'll be back to full width. But for doing this rough out work, I'll just be leaning harder on this side. And if this side happens to chip off too, then making it around is the easy solution. But I know other people, you know, if y'all are doing this, you've only got a few chisels, you don't have a big inventory of carbide, you can't afford to just throw away steel, you know, carbide. So that's one way to deal with it. Back to work. We already got one cut, cutting the second one, keep going. The upper end done there. Now I want to try to get this lower end matched, but I got to take a break. And so these are really close. This is a habit, just one more little thing to do. I'm still got to take stone off here and got to take stone off here. It's real common for us to either take a pencil and mark it up, because that'll help remind us when we come back that's there, or maybe we're walking by a stone and we see a problem and we hadn't got a pencil, we can smudge it up with our finger, put a black spot on there just with the dirt on our finger off the chisel. And then we'll notice that when we come back, like if you walk by a stone at the end of the day and you see there's a little line by the side of a mouth or something, you want to fix it, smudge it up. And that's not going to stain the stone as long as your hands aren't oily. If that's just dirt off your hands, just rub it. And then when you come back in the morning, you can take care of it. So it helps keep you remembering exactly where you were, because you'll have so many little things you're trying to capture that when you see something that's a problem, even when you're carving, you can reach over and just smudge it or just hit it with a pencil real quick. And then when you come back, you'll see there's a mark there, and you'll remember that's where that mark was, because invariably you'll see that mark, and you'll see one over here, you'll see one down here, you'll see something over here. All these little things that you got to keep track of, and you just slowly mark them, tick, 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 rub them with your finger. Then you come back. When you come back from sharpening tools, you're going to lose your spot. So take a break. This light's killing me. Well, these glasses are a drag, man. These little nose things just dry up and split, so you have to wear them without them. Us old people have to get these cheater ones that have got magnifying glasses on so you can see what we're doing. All right. I don't know if you can see this. The light's really harsh right now. It's 1:30. The sun's really hot, but I've got spots cut all the way to the end on that end. From this end down through to capture 2 of them. Everything fits nice and tight. Everything's good. Good agreement. So now I can go ahead and cut a couple more spots. Got one to cut here, 2 more here. I'll strip this off. But this way it captures my run out really well, and I can have a nice straight long front, and I won't have one end that's really off. It's any run out is split between the two ends. So it's coming good. I know the light's tough. We're going to try to show you how I cut this corner. Went ahead, of course, obviously we already did the end. Got this face pushed back over here to where this is really good. Now we're going to take and we're going to try to mark right along this line to just get an approximate line to where I'm going. And this is a pretty normal process, and I mentioned it before about cutting something as a relief or somewhere for something to break. We've got a fair amount of stone to take off here, and instead of being really bold and just breaking in, we try to cut back on behind it so there's something to go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sharp tools, and see I've almost completely recovered that chip corner because I've sharpened it a couple times. We're going to bevel this off to this red line. So we've got that bevel there, so we got a nice strong edge to create. And then we'll reduce this off. So let's see how this looks on the camera. Y'all even be able to see it. And I'm going to go start the bottom and then work my way up. Can you see that bevel? Now I don't have to go crazy with all this because we're going to waste all this off. We don't have to make all this perfect, but this will be a finished edge, and for 1/2 or 5/8 of an inch above that, that's going to be finished. So now we got this pretty secure. What we're going to do, I'm going to take and I'm going to just shape this down, push this down, because I got this edge to hold now. I'm going to cut this off, and then I'll take my tool and I'll axe everything down until it checks really well with my square, okay? You got to get really good at cutting these corners like this, because when you start doing all the detail work around the angel, you got a lot of edges and a lot of you always work away from your edge. Don't push like this. It'll hold and it'll pop that right out. Okay, now see if you can look, if you can see this good. I'm still a little bit proud, a little bit tall from where that red line is. But I've got to cut this entire face, okay? There's a perspective, you know, the old timers will talk about cutting exactly to the finish when you make a cut, and then you never touch it again. You just go all the way the first time and you never touch it again. Well, that's really great. Sometimes you can do that, but I'm going to cut this right to the end once. I'm not going to cut it several times. I'm going to cut it to the end once. But I'm going to wait right now. This is pretty much finished. But I've got to make sure that this justifies with that other end that's 6 feet away. So I'm not going to worry about fine-tuning this edge right now until I get the whole rest of this thing done. I'll put my straight edge on there and I'll check it. And I may find that I want to take that down a little bit, or I want to leave it where it is. So that right there is really good. We're up about 1 inch. And so we'll be, you know, going to this area to start our sculpture. I'm going to go ahead and strip the rest of this off. But when you do an edge like that, you've got to get good at these. You've got to be able to produce an edge like that every time, perfect, never have a failure, you know, and if you end up having a failure, you got to be able to fix it. So that's why you got to be able to do this boring stuff. But now I'm going to go ahead and just work on plowing the rest of this stone off and get this edge finished up. That's a really critical lesson to learn. A lot of people never learn how to do it. Back to work. As you're working these sides down to produce this line, it's really critical that you develop both of them in conjunction, because you'll make that line perfectly straight looking at it from one perspective, and from the other perspective, based upon this surface, it can still be really crooked. And so you've got to make sure that you flatten both sides at the same time to produce that straight line, and not cut a straight line and then match the sides to it, because your line probably won't be where you want it to be. This is really critical about learning to understand what you're seeing versus what you're looking at, because you're going to have a lot of detail in a face, especially with like one cheekbone next versus the other, one side of the face versus the other. You may have one, instead of turning the whole head for flat, turn it. you may have one side that protrudes more than the other to create that rotation, and the rest of your anatomy is not going to make any sense. It's a good way to practice it. You get your line straight by developing both sides at once. If you flatten this and keep the angle at right around 90 degrees, that line will end up being straight because it has to be, because these two surfaces are flat. If you make that line straight and then try to match the sides to it, it's going to be in the wrong place. And there we go. The front edge is cut. It's not perfect yet. It's almost 5 o'clock, the end of the day. I'm not going to start tuning it tonight. I'll do it in the morning. Take a straight edge and get rid of all the little wander that line has, but it's pretty close right like it is. And then we'll be able to turn it and start breaking it. So we'll probably wrap this video up. I think it may end up being a little shorter than the others, but there's not really anything else to show on this one. The fine tuning is just a little bit of scraping like I've done before with the pencil and the straight edge, marking it and just working them down. And then we'll start working on breaking. I have to figure out breaking, but that'll make the next video. And we'll work on the pitching this stone and probably break these corners off first to work them in and to relieve those ends, so when we break the end hard, it doesn't carry into the ends. But we'll go ahead and start pitching those ends and get them to where we want them. Probably saw part of it in, make it easier. It's just an easy way to do it. We'll saw in like to here and to here. We'll just put a saw cut straight down and straight down, and then have stuff we can break to break that right off, and then pitch the line down at the end. And we'll have to be careful on this other corner where we've got the inclusion, because that'll be soft. So we're making progress. Almost time to start carving. Hopefully we'll be able to start carving on it before doing the scotias shouldn't take that long. I'll probably leave a little bit of a margin on the top of the scotias because I'm planning to polish the top. It shouldn't be that big of a job to polish it, and that's how I quoted it. And that'll give me a chance to show y'all how to polish. Probably wait till it warms up a little bit, because polishing in the middle of winter is a drag, man. It's cold and nasty work. So we'll probably wait a little bit and do that once it starts getting hot. But beyond that, we'll just wrap this video up. My name's Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor doing some finishing work on a big vase here at Carolina Sculpture Studio as part of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Thanks for coming in.